Hi, I'm Cher Kaufman. Welcome to the Drawing Desk. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about markers, but I know I've done videos before on markers. This is a little bit different in the sense that I'm going to be very specific. These are water-based markers that we're going to be talking about today. And if you're anything like I am, if you've played with markers but didn't understand exactly how water markers differ from other markers like alcohol-based markers, then you might not have noticed some of the unique qualities that are really fun to play with. And so I wanted to show you some of the amazing things that a water-based marker can do. And once you realize what you can do with that, it's almost an entire other world that opens up for you. So what I've done is I've started out with picking a page from one of my coloring books, the Ancient Alchemy book. And even though I am highly partial to coloring the paper that comes in the coloring books, I think that's part of the process of learning how to work with your different tools, is working with the paper. I wanted to do something that kind of upped my paper quality so that it could take mixed media. Most coloring books are not designed to do mixed media, so when you introduce something that has a real wet medium like a water-based product, you're going to have a different kind of relationship with the paper that's in a coloring book. So I wanted to express a little bit thicker paper relationship with the pens. I've decided to work with a really heavy cardstock. Now this is a 110-pound cardstock. It is thicker than the cardstock that most people tend to gravitate toward, which is like a 65-pound cardstock. If you want to try that, you're more than welcome to. This is 110. The other thing that I have worked with is a mixed media Canson, I believe was the product, and I just cut that down. It was a larger piece of paper, and I wanted to cut it down so that I could run it through my printer and do an image based on that 98-pound mixed media, and it also worked well. But I wanted to give you the example on the cardstock because I think that is going to be what you might have more access to at your office supply store. So that's where I got mine. I got mine at an office supply store. So I've printed this out, and what I'm going to do is a little bit different than how I've done some of my other videos. I want to show you the techniques first, and then I'm going to work on this page, with the exception of the very first technique. That I want to show directly on this page so that I can get you going on what's going to happen. And then I'm going to move to a different kind of either time lapse or fading into some of the work that I'm going to be doing, just because this actually takes me several hours to work through. I take my time, I walk away, I come back. I love to see how the process unfolds and how the colors begin to merge together and how they look when they're dry. So it's going to take me more time than I can do in one sitting for you guys. So it's going to be a little bit different than how I've done other videos, but stick with me, it's a beautiful process. All right. Tombow is one of the water-based markers that I have. I also have a Prismacolor. This is like a student grade. It's the Scholar. So I just wanted you to know that just because I have one product here doesn't mean that I'm tied into using that marker. I can actually use other water-based markers using this blending palette. The blending palette is very helpful for combining colors, and then also using it like a palette that you would use for oil or acrylic or anything like that, only we're going to be using it for our water-based products. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to start with picking a few colors, and this is one of the very first techniques that I want you to just keep in mind, that I'm doing this first because there's something really amazing that happens with this technique, and I don't have any particular plan of how I'm putting these colors down. I'm just simply putting them down. And I'm going to take this real small spray mister. It's got a very small fine mist that it puts out, and I'm going to spray this directly onto my blending palette here. And then I'm going to take this, and I'm actually going to put it directly onto my coloring page. And then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to add more colors. think this time I'm going to add a little bit of green. And there's so much water on here, I'm just going to actually do two little mists. Now you can see that it's actually quite wet here, and if I wanted to, I can actually move my paper to get it to move onto the paper in other places. And I can also use a brush if I wanted to move this paper, this wet watercolor marker around. And I'm going to do this so that it covers my whole background area. Got a little bit of wetness here, so I'm going to see if I can get that to move a little bit. And I'm going to see if I can encourage a little bit of this to move outward. Now I have a little tiny bit of water here. I'm going to go ahead and just clean my brush up just a little bit in case I decide to use that later. And I'm going to immediately wipe this down so that I can use it again. You'll notice I always do this on top of another piece of paper because you'll see that there's a bunch of spray off from the water-based marker. Okay, one of the next techniques that you can do is you can take, while this is drying, you'll notice that my paper is curling just a little bit. I don't mind that myself, but if it bothers you, you'll probably want to get painter's tape or tape that works well with pulling up from off of paper and tape down your corners or your edges so that it dries flat. For me, that doesn't bother me. If you want this to dry faster, then you will take a hair dryer, or you can take one of the embossing heat guns and you can actually speed up the process to get this to dry a little bit faster. Another thing that you can do here is you can put down some of your water-based marker onto the blending palette, and you can use a water-based blending tool. Now you'll notice this is stained at the end, but it will not, let me grab a piece of paper here. It's much like your blending pens with pencils. If it's running clear, then there's no transfer of color. But what you can do here is you can actually pick up color. You can actually pick it up onto this and then use this as your paint palette, and you can add this to places. And it's got a really nice effect where it can blend out as it fades to kind of a clear. So again, if I'm done using that color, I would clean off the tip of the nib here. I'm going to pick up a little bit more color. I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. One thing you want to be careful with is that because I'm not letting the background dry and I'm moving into this next technique, I want to be very light so that I don't begin to pull up the paper. Otherwise it's going to begin to pill. It's going to degrade the integrity of the paper. Now over time, if I overwork this, it will do that a little bit. I don't mind that look. If you do, you're going to want to take your time and wait between your layers. I don't mind that the paper pulls up a little bit with this technique because it gives me a little bit of a rag look that I'm actually kind of like. The next technique I'm going to show you is by using, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to put this to the side just for a second. I want to show you a technique where you can take two different colors and you can move them together. We'll do this green and this blue. It's very helpful to have the darkest color. Well, actually you could do it either way, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the tips together and I'm going to do a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And the gravity is actually going to be pulling this dark blue into my green marker. So what happens is that over time, the blue is going to gently go into the vignette of the green, and you'll have a nice blended effect. And so that's one way to create a blending of these two markers, is to actually just have the tips touch each other and move slowly, and you can get a blended effect. Now if you didn't do this here, what you could do to get this coloring that's different here is you can actually put them onto your blending palette, use your blending tool, and you can actually begin to move them together and create a whole new color here. And then you can use that here. So that's one way where you can begin to try blending these markers together, is actually use your blending palette. And then you're going to clean off the nib. I'll clean it off here. I like to roll it around, make sure that it's nice and clean. Another something that you can do, which is kind of fun, and I'll show you on this scratch piece of paper here, is that you can actually use a little bit of water. You can use a paintbrush. You can dip and use this just like watercolor, and you can create your own effects. Very nice little washes that you can do. The other thing that you can do to move two colors together, let me clean this off. If you have two colors that are on your paper and you want to move them together, you can use your blending tool to begin to move the color out from one area into the other. And they will blend in the middle. I'm going to clean off my nib. But what I have found is that if I actually put this down first, it prepares the paper for moving these watercolors, and they move together more easily, I feel, in their blended area. So that would be using this to move them together, and this is applying it first and then having your marker applied. If you're going to be doing where you blend your colors together, Another thing that you could do is you can do 3-color blending, where you begin to move your colors together. It's advised to use 3 colors from darker to lighter. And you can get a blended effect that way. But just remember that you don't want to keep overworking your paper or it will begin to get soft. Okay, so I'm going to begin to work on this paper here after this is completely dried, and we'll do a little bit of all of these techniques using the tools of the water, the spray, the brush, just so that you can see how water-based markers can create an amazing image. Okay, there you go. There's some amazing techniques working with water-based markers. I hope you take the time to enjoy the magnificence of working with a new tool. I'm Cher Kaufman. Until next time, may you find more color in your day.